Does everybody have a copy of the Shostakovich poems? Do we need to take time for people to go get it? Okay. In 1973, on a visit to the United States, Shostakovich learned from doctors that his progressive neurological condition was irreversible and would be fatal. And in the face of this disastrous news, he turned to song, and in particular to the poems of Maria Tvetsaeva, one of the most famous 20th century Russian poets. And taken together, this cycle of 6 poems represents a journey that Shostakovich takes to deal with the question of the role of art in the face of the despair and possibly, and certainly the mortality of the artist. And also the role of the art and the artist in the face of oppression by the state. So the first poem, For My Poems, was written by a very young Tvetsaeva. It's a cry of exuberance, saying that although her poems do not yet have an audience, there's something explosive about them, and they will find their time. Yet Shostakovich sets these very darkly, and to understand why, we have to take his perspective also. He, from 1973, could see that Tvetsaeva indeed had become famous, but that her life had been terribly tragic. She was born in 1892, was married to an officer in the White Russian Army, and the family experienced dreadful hardship after the October Revolution. He disappeared for years. Their youngest daughter starved to death. They had to live for years and years in exile, finally returning to the Soviet Union in 1939, probably not the greatest timing. The husband and another daughter were immediately imprisoned, and Tvetsaeva and her son were sent off to a labor camp where, unable to compose or even to support herself, she committed suicide in 1941. So this poem is a mixture of youthful exuberance about the immortality of art and Shostakovich's reflection about mortality and disaster, all mixed together. The second poem, Where Does Such Tenderness Come From? Tvetsaeva wrote this for Osip Mandelstam, another young poet whom she met and had an affair with in St. Petersburg. And in the poet's voice, she is bewildered and bemused by why she feels such tenderness for this young man. It's not because he's so physically beautiful. She realizes this because his poetry is so beautiful. And also something about the almost feminine fluttering of his long eyelashes. And in fact, you'll hear the fluttering of the eyelashes in the piano part. Now, Mandelstam also had a tragic life where his poetry was also banned by Stalin. He was imprisoned. He tried twice to commit suicide. He was released and then rearrested and died under mysterious circumstances on his way to a labor camp. And his poetry only survived because his widow had memorized it. The third poem is the centerpiece, really, of the song cycle. Hamlet's dialogue with his conscience, in which a grief-stricken Hamlet wonders what he could or should have done after the death of Ophelia by drowning either from suicide or from madness. And he says to himself, I loved her more than 10,000 brothers, but not as much as one lover. Tvetsaeva wrote this in the midst of a passionate exchange of letters with Boris Pasternak. For Pasternak and many Soviet artists, Hamlet was a really important figure. The idea that something was rotten in the state, that the king was a criminal, cursing their own fate that they had been born at a time to set it right and yet were unable to do so. As a matter of fact, in a society where just speaking out as an artist could mean artistic or literal suicide, it gives new meaning to the phrase to be or not to be. So people like Pasternak and Shostakovich felt a kind of survivor's guilt in seeing the deaths of artists such as Tvetsaeva, wondering, should I have done more? Should I have loved more? And also, should I have loved art more? Should I have made more sacrifices? Now, it's interesting that Tvetsaeva ends this poem with a Hamlet who is so confused that he asks, I loved her? With a question mark. But Shostakovich changes it to an ellipsis, making it a statement. Yes, I loved her. I loved art enough, even though I was not always able to save it. So here's the first half of this song cycle by Shostakovich.
Oh. Thank you.